Happy trails to you. It's great to say hello and to share with you the joy I've come to know.
I want to kind of explain some of the dilemma that I have in standing up here in this whole thought that I want to start and share with you. It is, I guess, if I can say this is a precursor message to something that's been playing in my head for quite some time. I don't have it all ironed out, I want to admit to you. I will be doing the entire series of messages at a church in Harrisonburg. I've got to do 30 sermons for one church in 1 month.
Oh my God.
And all of them are going to be on this subject. What my thought in the back of my mind is that I see the issue as so paramount and that there's so much to be weighed out, but where do you start? Here's my dilemma, and you find verse 16. We'll start there, read down through 22. And I won't labor the point. I want to give you as much as I can and hopefully to spark enough thought in your mind that maybe you can take this thought, or if it ever gets in book form, you can come back and buy my book. I don't know. But I want things. I'm a type of person that everything has to work. And if something doesn't work, then pretty soon I get real frustrated with it. And that's the same way with my Christian life. Is I want my life to work. The reason I introduced you to Alan Weekly a moment ago, he was probably one of the greatest tools used by God. I've been pastored a number of years. This has been my 36th year in the ministry. But I can tell you from personal experience, it wasn't until Alan and I started hooking up and his challenges to me and my spiritual growth, even though I was his pastor, God had used him and Cindy and their family to make such a major impact on my life. I want to share those principles, but here's the problem that I'm dealing with. How do I, and I don't know the answer to this issue, how do I synopsize, if you will, all that I want to say in a book that's going to be 20-something chapters down into a 10 or 15 or 20-minute sermon? I don't know. So here's what I'm going to have to do. I'm going to give you as much as I can. If I see you going to sleep, I know that I need to stop and gnaw. But as long as I can, and I hope in the next few moments that your mind is challenged and that you're able to leave this place this morning by saying, I think I can put that into practice, and I think that from this day on, I can see God working in my life. I do want to make the same statement that I made to the Full Gospels businessmen and the other churches that I'm speaking with. Since learning the principles that I want to start sharing with you this morning, I can only tell you what it has done to me, my home, and my family. And I can say to you, out of the 35 or 6 years of pastoring, I have seen more miracles in my personal life, in my family's life, and in my home life in the last year and a half more than I have the previous 35 years put together. Now, I don't know where you are, but that excites me, doesn't it, you?
Yeah.
That somehow, I told Alan, I said, Alan, please come, because I wasn't for sure, and I'm really not for sure even now, if some of these ideas are going to be almost too catchy, too much in people's ideas to say, wait a minute, how can you make those outlandish statements and yet can they apply to our personal lives and see a growth? Let's follow the verse, if you will. Chapter 4, 1 Samuel, verse 16. And the man said unto Eli, I am he that came out of the army, and I fled today out of the army. And he said, what is there done, my son? He's asking in respects to the army of Israel going out to battle against the Philistine army. This is the second battle, and this young man is coming back to report to Eli, who was, if for a better term, the preacher in charge. He says to him, how did everything go? Verse 17. And the messenger answered and said, Israel has fled before the Philistines, and there was also a great slaughter among the people, and your 2 sons, Phinehas, have died in that battle. Now watch the next one. He says, and they are dead, and the ark is taken. And it came to pass when they made mention of the ark, that he fell from off of his seat backward by the gate, and his neck broke, and he died. For he was old and heavy, and he had judged Israel for 40 years. Now here's what really we want to look at. And his daughter-in-law, Phinehas his wife, was with child, near to be delivered, and when she heard the tidings that the ark of God was taken, and that her father-in-law and husband were dead, she bowed herself in travail, for her pains came upon her. And about the time of her death, the woman that stood by her said unto her, Fear not, for you have borne a son. But she answered not. That's the woman giving birth. She answered not the midwife, who said, You have a son. Neither did she regard it. The next verse. And she named the child Ichabod, saying, The glory of the Lord is departed from Israel, because the ark was taken, and because her father-in-law and her husband. And she said, The glory is departed from Israel, and the ark of God is taken. I want to talk to you from the subject of bring back the glory.
Amen.
In fact, if we can just, since they made it clear we're Pentecostal, instead of saying amen, I'd like you to just say, practice with me, instead of saying amen, just say, bring back the glory. Could you do that with me?
Bring back the glory.
Bring back the glory.
Amen.
The phrase, bring back the glory, or how it came about, that verse tells us in verses 21 and 22, happened because of the woman who was about to give birth. She finds out that the army of Israel has lost 2 battles. The first time 4,000, the second time 30,000. Then following that, the news of her husband and brother-in-law are both killed in that army. Then you find out that that news gets back to her father-in-law. He falls off the stool, breaks his neck, and he is dead, and the ark is gone. I've heard the statement, when it rains, it pours. It really must have been pouring in her life. She goes into an early delivery, and I can picture that because I've been in the medical profession now for 30-some-odd years. That she gives premature birth to that child, and we're really not for sure who calls that child its name. Ichabod. Say that with me. Ichabod. The word Ichabod is a compound name. Actually, in the Hebrew, if you take the I off, it means something in Hebrew that has gone, left, departed. Something that's not present any longer. And the word kabod or kabod in the Hebrew means something that's splendorous. Something that you can see easily. When it's speaking of the riches of Abraham, it said that he had the glory of his riches. It wasn't something that was hid. When you seen Abraham come with his servants and everything that he owned, he had a lot of, if you can use the word glory, if you will. You find that amazing statement that she says to that child, I'm going to call you that the glory of the Lord has departed from Israel. The glory. The glory of the Lord has departed out of Israel. I want to say that kind of a couple statements very quickly. Isn't that a unique word, glory? I love words. When I read Scripture, words pop out to me. Not entire sentence. Not whole chapters, not even concepts or thoughts, just a word will pop out at me, and then it almost eats me alive until finally I have to say to myself, what does that word actually mean? I was a little amazed to find out that we really have made it a cliche, haven't we? That the glory of the Lord rise among us. There's songs written about it. I've heard preachers preached on. Ichabod, the glory of the Lord has departed. Haven't you? In fact, I went to the dictionary and I started looking and doing some study, trying to ask the question, how would you define that word glory? Let me read a couple of them to you. One person says it's the splendor of God. Don't you love it when we're ambiguous in describing a word? Have you ever seen someone give a definition and you have no idea what the definition of what the word they were trying to describe? Another person said this, it's the ball of God, B-A-L-L, of God in a big round light like the sun. The sun is there, you feel its heat, you know it's round, but you can't look at it. That's the glory of God. Another person went on to say it's the purity of God. It's God in awesome form. He's so holy and we're so trashy. We can't look or be around God because of His glory. One person says it's because of His Shekinah. By the way, the Shekinah doesn't mean glory. The word Shekinah in the Hebrew simply means something that settles down or dwells in a certain place. So when you say something like the Shekinah glory of God, you're not describing the glory, you're describing the act of what it's doing. You're saying to yourself, I want whatever God's glory is, I want it to settle where I am. I like how one man put it this way. Listen to this definition. Now you got to remember, I'm not for sure if I'm thinking clearly, but this definition just kind of like makes me want to fall out and I get discombobulated. Listen to the definition. Defining the glory of God is so important that everyone should do it, but it's impossible. I say because it's more like the word beauty than the word basketball. Thank you for nothing, right? Anybody feel that? If it's that important and we're able to talk about it in church, I have one question for any group of people, and that is simply, then what is the glory of God? Had you been sitting there next to that woman about to give birth, what would it have looked like? If you could have leaned over in her ear and said, sweetie, what left? Was it the ark? Was it the fact that her husband and father-in-law are dead? Was it the 34,000 men and women who had perished in the battle? Let me just say a couple of things very quickly, and just so that you'll put it in. Let me define the word. And I want you to put this down because if you get nothing else, I want you to leave this building knowing exactly in your mind then what is the glory of God. I have gone into churches that is a major issue. They want God's glory, and not one person can define it. Something's wrong with that ideology. Something's wrong with that theology that we would say that we want something and yet have no idea what we're asking for. It sounds good, doesn't it? Number one, put this in just plain. The glory of God is the manifestation of some part of an invisible God. I'm going to say it again. When Scripture talks about the glory of God, it's talking about how God would manifest Himself to individuals. Let me go where maybe you're not comfortable with. A lot about God is really invisible, isn't it? I mean, have you ever physically ever seen God? Have you ever held His hand, looked into His eyes? And yet, when God chooses to make Himself real to an individual or a group of people, that manifestation is called His glory. I like it how a couple verses put it this way. It's when God shows up in the camp. And if you'll let me say this, you know what the Church of Jesus Christ needs? It needs God to show up in the camp. need less articulation, less men who can swirl great words around people who don't understand what he's saying. And we need for God to walk in the building and see lives changed.
Amen.
I believe the cry of every human being, atheist or Christian or agnostic, is the statement made by David in Psalms. When he says, as of the hart panteth after the water brook, so panteth my heart after you, God. No, wait a minute. After the living God. We've got enough of everything else. People are dying to hear from God himself. May I say something to you? The manifestation of the presence of God is our highest concern. For God to come back in the church to where lives are changed, people are healed, their lives are put back together, should be the goal of everything that we do. Let me ask you the question, and you say, Pastor, then what are you going to speak on? If this is a 40-some-odd hour seminar that you want to give, what are you going to give to us this morning? 4 principles. I want to say to you, and I want you to mark this down, I did some research for years on this subject before really giving it out. Do you know that the lack of being able to really get a hold of God is what really has caused the earth's demise? Let me make a statement, and I challenge you to challenge me on this. Do you know why Adolf Hitler murdered 6 million Jews? Do the research. He was studying to be of the clergy. His brother was killed. He went to the priest and asked them, tell me, where was God during that? You know what the priest says? I have no answers for you. Joseph Stalin, who took 30 million lives, looked in the mirror while in seminary as a priest and said, my face is distorted. He went back to school the next day in seminary, asked the teacher, please explain why my hand is short, my face is messed up, and nobody seems to care. The priest said to him, stop asking questions like that and leave the office. Stalin, as he walked out the door, turned to a friend of his and said, the world will hasten the day that I will murder every single person that I can. 30 million people later. Charles Darwin, The Affirmation of Life, before he wrote The Theory of Evolution, do you realize he had asked the same question, where is God? These men did not get up one day and decide to be some enemy of the cross. They got up with this question, where's this glory? Where is this God that we talk about in church? Where is God who can heal, save, deliver, and set people's lives free? Where is He? Let me read to you one of my favorite people who I've loved forever was Friedrich Nietzsche. You ever heard of Friedrich Nietzsche?
Yes.
Nietzsche was the person who made it his life's goal to kill God.
That's right.
In fact, he was the person who coined the word, God is dead.
Yep.
He wrote this unbelievable poem called The Madman. Have you ever read it? Mm-hmm. I think it should be required of everyone to read this poem over and over again. Now, Nietzsche was a staunch atheist. Remember that, not an agnostic. He believed in nothing at all. He said a man is a fool to assent to anything outside of himself. Wrote these words. It's a little lengthy. It takes about 2.5 minutes to read it. But I want you to listen to it. Had you ever heard about a madman who lit a lantern in the bright morning hours? He ran into the marketplace and cried incessantly, I'm looking for God. I'm looking for God. Many of the people who did not believe in God were standing there together. He excited a lot of laughter. Have you lost him? Someone asked. Did he lose his way like a child? Has he gone on a voyage and now you can't find him? They shouted and laughed. This madman sprang into their midst and pierced them with his glance. Where has God gone? I cry, I tell you, we have killed him, you and I. We are his murderers. But we have done this. How could we have done this? Are we able to wipe away the entire horizon of everything? Can we take a sponge and dry up the ocean? What do we do with the facts that we have killed God? We have killed him, and how shall we, murderers of all murderers, console ourselves, which is the holiest and mightiest to have ever lived, and yet has bled and died under each of our knives? What festival of atonement will we make? What sacred games shall we invent? Is not the greatness of our deed too great for us? Must not we become gods ourselves in the fact that we have killed God? There has never been a greater deed. And whosoever is born after us, for the sake of this deed, they will know that this was the greatest hour in history. He goes on to say, here the madmen fell silent and again regarded his listeners, and they too were silent, and they stared with him in astonishment. At last he threw the lantern down, and it broke and went out. I've come too early. Then he said, my time has not yet come. The tremendous event is still on its way, traveling. We have not seen it completed. Lightning takes time. Stars take time. Deeds done wrong by children take time. This is still yet on its way. Listen to the end. This is from an atheist. This is from a man who says, no, God is dead, wrote this. He further went on to relate that same day that the madman went into churches asking the questions, singing out their songs, which no one answered. He ended by saying this, then if God is dead, these churches are nothing more than the sepulchres and the tombs of the dead God. May I ask you a serious question? Is God alive in your life?
Amen.
Let me give you four principles. I won't belabor them. And we'll close. I thought about, do I share the ideas of how to have the glory of God? Because that's important, right? But I've chosen instead to pop out 4 ideas having to do with the whys. Why is it so important? We're doing well, aren't we? I mean, there's some churches. I was at a church December the 1st in Oklahoma City, and we had 146,000 people in that church Sunday mornings. No, 146,000. They were standing room only at 80 campuses. Hey, God, maybe it's okay for you to be dead. We're doing great, right? We got our good jobs, our great insurance, we're just everything that's in its role. And this woman sits there and she says, Ichabod, there's something that's left, gone, departed. Let me give you principle number 1, why I am absolutely committed to the thought that God has to return to the church in a mighty way.
Yes.
Principle number 1. Because it is the only thing that will affect the next generation. It is the only thing that will affect the next generation. I say this, and I said it and I got kind of chided for it from another church, but I can say it here and I don't really mind. If I was the youth of today, I would not be in church. You say, you're kidding. No. My son John is here. I want to say my boss, really. And we are in a church, oh my God. He's going to be saved not because he's a Christian, but by the mere fact that his dad drags him everywhere. We are in churches you can't believe. Starting in June or July, I have to do 5 services a day. 5 on Sunday, 2 on Saturday, and 1 on Wednesday night. Now listen to my statement. Look, if you will. Write down Judges chapter 2, verses 10 to 13. Also there arose another generation after them, after their fathers, who knew not the Lord, neither the miracles that he had done. Now watch. That generation, their dads, grandpa, that religious group had died. God was real. But at some generation, somewhere, something happened. And it stopped. That verse of Scripture says, then that generation forsook the Lord. In almost without fail, every church that I attend now, there is a cry from the youth saying, where in the heck is the real Jesus Christ? I was with my oldest daughter, and she's an in thing. You know what I mean? Dad's bald and old. She's the in thing. Big house, big job, big cars. I was with her in service. And it was unbelievable. And I don't want to kick her church because it was great. It was hitting it, and the youth were standing and they were jumping, and I leaned over to her and I said, hey, Dad's hip, right? Right? So I leaned over to her and I said, man, don't you love this? Wanting to be encouraging to her because, I don't want her dad to think he's an old funny duck. She looked back at me and she said, Dad, you want to know I really wish? I wish God would show up in our church like it was years ago. I said, one day, girl, Escalade girl, $125,000 car, 1-point-something million for your home, can buy anything you want. What did you say? I brought this to show you that if God does not do something in our lives where our children can see it, then they have no right to follow the God that we kind of perpetrate in church.
Happy trails to you till we meet again.